There's a scene in The Sound of Music that has made millions of people cry, smile, and fall in love. Soft moonlight, a gazebo, two people slowly realizing they can't fight their feelings anymore. Captain Von Trapp leans in. Maria looks up. The moment is perfect. Except it wasn't. Not even close. What actually happened during that shoot was so ridiculous that the studio spent years making sure nobody ever found out. The cast couldn't hold it together. Take after take got destroyed. The director eventually gave up and changed the entire scene just to hide the chaos. For decades, Fox kept it buried. Then Julie Andrews sat down on a talk show and told the world exactly what went wrong in that gazebo. And once you hear it, you'll never watch that scene the same way again. But that's just one secret. Behind The Sound of Music is a story full of bad deals, near-death accidents, a drunk leading man who hated every second of being there, and a studio so desperate it was one bad week away from shutting down completely. The film that looked like pure joy from the outside was, behind the camera, absolute madness. And it all started not in Hollywood, not on Broadway, but in post-war West Germany. Back in 1956, a German producer named Wolfgang Liebeneiner released two films based on Maria von Trapp's memoir. They were sentimental, simple, shot on a modest budget. Nobody outside Europe gave them much thought. But inside post-war West Germany, they hit hard. People who had survived years of destruction and grief were starving for something warm and hopeful. Both films became the biggest commercial hits the country had seen in years. The story spread across Europe, found audiences in South America, and connected with people across languages who had never heard of the real Von Trapp family. Then American studios got a look. The reaction was brutal, too corny, too foreign, too sentimental. Nobody in Los Angeles was lining up to bring this Austrian family to American screens. That changed when a director named Vincent Donahue sat down to watch them. He had a Tony Award and a sharp instinct for emotional stories. His first reaction was the same as everyone else's: clumsy, awkward, outdated. But then something shifted. Underneath the cheap production, he found something nobody else had looked for. The story had soul. And Donahue said something that changed everything. Don't make this a film, turn it into a Broadway musical, for Mary Martin. That one sentence set off a chain reaction. But before Broadway could happen, someone had to track down the woman whose life this was all based on. And that turned out to be a lot harder than expected. Maria von Trapp was deep in the jungles of Papua New Guinea doing missionary work. No phone, no internet, just occasional piles of letters waiting at remote mission posts. Letters from some American couple kept showing up, talking about Broadway. Maria didn't open them. She tore them up, every single one. She was running clinics, teaching music in villages, and living about as far from Times Square as a human being could get. But years before any of that, Maria had made a decision that would cost her enormously. Back in the early 1950s, German filmmakers offered to buy the rights to her life story. Maria had no agent, no legal team. She just needed money to support her family. So she said yes for a one-time payment of $9,000. In today's money, roughly $14,000, a fraction of what was coming. The only reason Broadway even became possible was a coincidence on a San Francisco pier. When Maria finally returned to the US by ship, Richard Holliday was waiting at the dock. He was the husband of Mary Martin, the biggest Broadway star of the era, and he had been trying to reach Maria for years. He handed her 2 tickets to see his wife perform in Annie Get Your Gun. Maria agreed, probably just to be polite. What she saw stopped her cold. Mary Martin was electrifying, magnetic, impossible to look away from. Maria was moved, but still had bad news. The film rights were already sold. That door was closed. Still, she gave them a casual green light. "Give it your best shot," she said. That one offhand sentence would eventually reshape the entire entertainment industry. When producers got serious about the stage musical, the original plan was simple: mix traditional Austrian folk songs with just a few new numbers, a little Broadway flavor over old European charm. So they approached Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein and asked them to write 1 or 2 songs. Rodgers and Hammerstein said no. Not a partial no, a complete non-negotiable no. Either they wrote everything from scratch or they were out. It was all or nothing.
The producers paused, waited for them to finish another project, and when they came back, the entire concept had been rebuilt from the ground up. All original songs. My Favorite Things, Do Re Mi, Edelweiss, Climb Every Mountain. Songs people still know by heart 6 decades later.
Opening night was November 16, 1959. The show racked up over $232 million in advanced bookings before most people had even seen it. Mary Martin missed exactly one performance across the entire run. 1,443 performances, nearly 4 years. By 1960, a bidding war for the film rights had already started. 20th Century Fox came out on top, paying $1,250,000, more than $13 million in today's money. For a studio already reeling from Cleopatra, which had gone $15 million over budget and nearly destroyed the company, it was a breathtaking gamble. People thought Fox had lost their minds. Buried in the contract was a clause that co-writer Howard Lindsay literally laughed at. If the film made more than $12.5 million, Rodgers and Hammerstein's estate would get 10% of the profits. Lindsay didn't think the movie would get anywhere near that number. He could not have been more wrong. By the early 1960s, Julie Andrews was already a Broadway legend. Her run as Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady had made her one of the most beloved performers of her generation. So when it came time to turn My Fair Lady into a film, the obvious move was to cast her. Hollywood said no. Executives decided she wasn't camera ready. What that actually meant was they didn't think she was glamorous enough. They cast Audrey Hepburn instead. Hepburn was iconic, but she couldn't sing like Julie. Most of her musical numbers had to be dubbed. Andrews had carried that show for years and was passed over at the biggest moment. Director Robert Wise was already searching for someone to play Maria von Trapp. He wasn't sold on Andrews until someone at Disney showed him a rough cut of Mary Poppins, a film not yet finished. Wise watched a few minutes and turned to the screenwriter beside him. Sign her before anyone else does. Julie was offered $225,000, solid for a rising star, but no royalties, no bonuses, no box office percentage. She cashed the check, and that was it financially. Meanwhile, Mary Martin, who originated the role on stage, had negotiated a deal that ultimately earned her more than $8 million. Fox didn't think Andrews was enough of a draw to deserve a back-end deal. That calculation aged terribly. Mary Poppins became a smash. Julie Andrews won the Oscar for Best Actress. When she accepted it, she thanked Jack Warner, the very man who had decided she wasn't good enough for My Fair Lady. Quiet, polished, absolutely devastating. The audience loved every second of it. The Sound of Music would become the role that defined her career, and despite the film earning hundreds of millions worldwide, she never saw a dollar beyond that original flat fee. Finding her on-screen partner was turning into a separate crisis. Captain Von Trapp should have been a dream role. Handsome, brooding, emotionally complex, but nobody wanted it. Sean Connery passed, Richard Burton wasn't interested, even Bing Crosby's name was floated. Nothing landed. Then came Christopher Plummer. Classically trained, sharp, quietly intense. On paper, perfect. In reality, he wanted nothing to do with the project. He thought the script was emotionally hollow. He called it the sound of mucus in private conversations and turned the role down multiple times. Robert Wise flew to London personally to change his mind. Plummer agreed, but only with conditions. The captain needed more depth, better dialogue, and his own song. That demand is why Edelweiss exists. It was not an old Austrian folk song. Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote it specifically for Plummer's character, to give the captain a moment of quiet vulnerability on screen. It became one of the most beloved songs in the film. Even after all that, Plummer struggled. He admitted later that he drank heavily during the shoot. During the scene where the Von Trapp family performs their farewell to the Nazi officers, Plummer was drunk. He said it was the only way he could get through it. And then came the detail that genuinely infuriated him. Those scenes where Captain Von Trapp sings, that's not entirely Plummer's voice. The demanding vocal passages were performed by Bill Lee, a professional singer who had also dubbed for Disney. Plummer was furious. Most audiences never noticed. Lee's voice blended so naturally that people still believe they're hearing Plummer.
Despite the drinking, the frustration, and the dubbed vocals, the performance held up for 60 years. He just needed a few decades away from the film before he could admit it had mattered. Casting the Von Trapp children was its own drawn-out chaos. Mia Farrow auditioned for the role of Liesel 3 times. The notes on her were blunt, sweet, but no spark. Can't really dance. The role went to Charmian Carr, who was 21 years old playing a character written as 16. Farrow losing the part stung, but a few years later, she terrified the world in Rosemary's Baby, and her career found its real identity. Kurt Russell auditioned for Friedrich. Patty Duke and Terry Garr put their names in too. The role went to Nicholas Hammond, a 15-year-old the director responded to immediately. Years later, Hammond became the first live-action Spider-Man on television. The rest of the children were chosen after months of auditions. What nobody planned was what happened between them once filming started. They became a real family. They stayed close for decades, showed up for each other through life events, and reunited regularly long after the film had passed into legend. Filming in Salzburg looked like a postcard. Rolling hills, alpine meadows, fairy tale architecture. But behind the beauty was a logistical nightmare. The location shoot was supposed to wrap in 6 weeks. It took 11. Salzburg in 1964 was having one of its worst weather years on record. Rain came constantly. Over 250 passing crews sat in wet clothes burning through the budget while waiting for clouds to part. Hotel bills, equipment repairs, extra meals, rising wages, all of it kept costing money Fox could barely afford. One insider said the quiet part out loud. This movie might finish us.
It also nearly had a director it never should have had. William Wyler, one of Hollywood's most respected filmmakers, was originally hired to lead the production. He even resigned from Fox's board to avoid a conflict of interest. But Wyler had never connected with the material. He flew to New York to see the Broadway show and left confused. The songs felt unnatural to him, and he was quietly losing his hearing, which made directing a musical a particularly difficult assignment. When producers offered him The Collector, a dark psychological thriller, he jumped at it. The official story was scheduling conflicts. The truth was Wyler ran from The Sound of Music as fast as he professionally could. Robert Wise stepped in and inherited everything, including the boat scene. During the sequence where the children fall into the lake, 5-year-old Kim Karath, who played Gretel, nearly drowned. The crew knew she couldn't swim. The plan was for Julie Andrews to grab her the moment the boat tipped. When it flipped, Andrews fell backward away from the child. Kim went under twice before another cast member pulled her out. She swallowed enough water to make herself sick and developed a fear of swimming that lasted years. Andrews called it one of the scariest moments she experienced on set. The opening meadow scene, the most iconic image from the entire film, came with its own punishment. To get that aerial shot of Andrews spinning with her arms open, a helicopter had to circle just 20 feet above her. Every pass slammed her flat into the grass from the rotor wash. She was knocked down 6 or 7 times, got up each time, brushed off the dirt, and kept smiling. She joked later that she had nearly been launched into Austria. Now back to that gazebo. The carbon arc lights used to simulate moonlight were massive industrial machines, heavy, hot, and extremely loud. The noise they produced when shifting wasn't dramatic, it was flatulent, a long, wet, low rumble. And every time Christopher Plummer leaned in toward Julie Andrews, the lights made that noise. Take after take, 20 attempts. The moment they got close to each other's faces, the sound came from below like clockwork. Neither of them could hold it together. The serious dialogue collapsed into laughter. The crew gave up pretending to stay professional around attempt 10. Hours passed. Nothing improved. Robert Wise eventually accepted the original plan was dead. He repositioned them in front of the glowing gazebo windows and shot the entire scene in silhouette, faces mostly hidden, expressions irrelevant, shaking shoulders from suppressed laughter invisible against the light. The result looked more romantic than anything they had originally designed. That soft, dreamlike, backlit glow was not an artistic choice, it was damage control. Fox locked it down after filming. Cast and crew were told not to mention the lights, the sounds, or the failed takes.
For years, audiences believed the scene had gone off perfectly. Julie Andrews finally broke the silence on a talk show decades later. She was laughing as she described it. Very hard to be nose to nose in a love scene with those sounds coming at you from below. The audience lost it, and somewhere the executives who had spent years burying that story probably cracked a smile too. When The Sound of Music opened in 1965, nobody expected what came next. Gone with the Wind had ruled the all-time box office since 1939. 26 years of dominance, through wars, new technologies, and entire generations of filmmaking. By November 1966, just 18 months after release, it was over. The Sound of Music had earned $286 million worldwide on 1960s ticket prices, roughly 283 million tickets sold. With a global population of around 3.3 billion at the time, that's nearly 1 in every 12 people alive on Earth. People who didn't speak English were humming Do-Re-Mi. Edelweiss was recognized in villages without electricity. No streaming, no viral marketing, just word of mouth, and families going back again and again. 5 Oscars followed: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Sound, Best Editing, Best Score. Robert Wise, who had already won for West Side Story, became one of the rare directors to take the top prize twice. Fox, the studio that had been days away from collapse, was saved. And all of it came from a woman tearing up letters in a jungle, a $9,000 deal signed without a lawyer, a leading man who privately mocked the whole production, and a set of industrial lights that would not stop making fart noises at the worst possible moment. That's the real Sound of Music, and it's better than the one on screen.